BlockTV. It's time now for HODL with HEDL, a chance to zoom out for a moment and take a wider perspective on some of the heady issues that dominate the crypto markets as a whole. And to guide us on this journey of discovery, we're joined as always by Bitcoin influencer and thought leader Dan Held, Director of Business Development at Kraken. Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
All right, so kicking us off this week, Dan, we've had what could be called a week of fear, despair, and general blues around the crypto sphere as a whole. We saw that massive dip that took Bitcoin down all the way to 6,500. There now seems to be some recovery, but no doubt the markets are shaken. Retail investors are afraid. What can be done to combat all this, Dan? How can we shake off these nasty winter blues?
Well, that's what Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency markets teach you. After surviving these very volatile swings, both up and down, it teaches you to fight that animal instinct inside you, which is the fear and greed instinct. Markets are largely driven by this, and you see this bearish sentiment when the prices drop. The prices themselves are an indication of aggregate sentiment around the value of the protocol and whether people are bullish or bearish. When the price drops, that increasingly makes people feel bearish. Even though nothing's fundamentally changed with the Bitcoin network, when the price drops, people feel fearful. And I've seen this happen multiple times. I've been through three Bitcoin cycles in terms of a boom and a bust cycle. And after being through three of these and seeing a lot of short-term drops and a bunch of little short-term pumps, it's really this instinct of fear. You can almost always, I don't really advocate for day trading, but I think you can, if you fight this sort of gut instinct, you can trade really, really well, which is buying when you're most fearful and selling when you're most greedy. And so it's pretty fascinating once you've sat in this space as long as I have to just kind of observe this behavior from a almost third party perspective, because I don't have that much emotion into it anymore. And over the last week, we've definitely seen the bears come out, the fear really kind of ooze out into the market. You've probably seen it on Twitter and in Telegram chat rooms. And this is something that I think is a classic indication. I'm not going to call a bottom, but a classic indication of a bottom forming eventually, and really representing kind of if this is the most fearful we get, what do things look like when we get optimistic? That's always a nice way that I like to reframe it. And so it's kind of funny that people are feeling fearful at 7,000 or 6,500. Last time I saw, in the 2015, 2016 bottom of that bear market, I saw Bitcoin print $200 and I was still bullish. So the idea that people are bearish in Bitcoin $7,000 is almost comical to me.
Now, I've got to wonder as well, though, with you, Dan, because there's one interesting factor when it comes to Bitcoin, which is that a lot of its investors, particularly the more loyal investors, do have an unbelievable capacity to hodl on, regardless of the sort of numbers being placed before them. When we'll see Bitcoin drop 90% from an all-time high, and yet those hodlers out there will continue to stay with the network, to stay with the asset class on the belief that it will turn back around and that inevitably there will be that re-climbing and re-hitting of those all-time highs. What do you think is it about Bitcoin that makes its investors so absolutely loyal, even in the darkest of Bitcoin winters?
That's a great question. I think it starts with the root of coming to believe in the idea. To believe in Bitcoin means you're going to reject a lot of fundamental leanings, whether that be trust in the central bank and trust in governments, or trust in Keynesian economics versus Austrian School of Economics, or trust in encryption and game theory rather than just faith in some leader or faith in some corporation. And so when people go down this rabbit hole, they're required to build a kind of new set of knowledge, a new understanding of how the world works. And once you come to that realization, it's really hard to go back and believe in the old system. And so I think, when we go look at and we go examine Bitcoin, the way that I like to phrase it is that Bitcoin is stable. The protocol is stable. It's at an uptime of 99.998 something percent. And if over the last 7 years, it's been an uptime of 100%, or let's see, last 6 years, it's been an uptime of 100%. Bitcoin is stable. The protocol is stable. What we perceive as the instability of Bitcoin's price is merely the instability or volatility of the world coming into the stability of Bitcoin in ebbs and flows. So really, Bitcoin is very stable. It's more of the per unit price that people are constantly speculating on.
Certainly a matter of perspective, perhaps, there, whether you're looking inside the network or without. But regardless of the network, its stabilities, its values, unit values, whatever it may be, there is one constant as we get to this time of year. And I'm not talking here necessarily about crypto winter, but actual winter and the times of holidays and family that it brings for those in and around the sphere. It's a time when we all get together, carve the turkey, carve the ham, whatever it might be that your family tradition is. And invariably, those in the crypto sphere, I myself have faced this many times, are going to be caught up in a conversation with family about their views on cryptos, on Bitcoin, what it means, what it does, what this funny internet money actually means, explaining that to parents, grandparents, whomever it may be. Dan, how is your average person supposed to be able to deal with this sort of crypto concerns over the holidays?
Yeah, so this is a classic sort of issue that is that a lot of Bitcoiners face is, how do I talk to my friends and family about this? And so, we have to remember first that Bitcoin is perceived as something really, really complicated. As John Oliver puts it, Bitcoin is everything you don't understand about money with everything you don't understand about computers. At least that's how it's perceived by the layman. So I think first you should acknowledge a lot of their concerns and worries. I think by developing a common sort of acknowledgement, that's a great way to start. So, for example, they might say, "Hey, isn't it really volatile?" And you could go, "Yeah, it is." So you acknowledge, like, yes, you are correct. But maybe you throw in, "Yeah, it's just as volatile as the early Apple was," or something that's more relatable. Again, this is like a new territory for them. So acknowledging their fears and then giving them a sort of common area of understanding, I think, is really, really critical. Second is that people don't know they have a problem, or people don't really realize why they need a solution if they don't understand the problem that they have. So when we start by talking about Bitcoin first, we forget that they don't understand that they have a problem to begin with. So most people need an education on the traditional financial system, or little nuggets around why Bitcoin would be a good alternative. If you just start with Bitcoin, you're providing a solution to a group of people that really don't understand what problem they have. And they're going to go, "Well, I don't see why I need this." So I think starting with the basic sort of education around, why people shouldn't trust banks or why people shouldn't trust central banks, I think starting there first is probably more critical than starting with Bitcoin. I know we're all really excited to talk about Bitcoin, but I think it's critical to make sure that we put that within a framework that they'll understand.
And Dan, I got to pick your brain on this one because, as well, how, as an OG in this space, someone who's been around it for so long, how do you combat what I call the glassy eyes effect? It's a situation I think most people who've have a passion for Bitcoin have come across, which is when you start trying to explain a fundamental tenet of the Bitcoin, the crypto network as a whole, or even, as you say, even the problems that exist in the current fiat system, and you're just faced with the glassy-eyed, sure, man, whatever you're talking about. How do you use a sort of technique to sort of break through to people and get that first spark of, all right, maybe this guy's got something to say?
I've seen that exact look. So that's funny that you bring it up. Yeah, the glassy-eyed look, the moment you say encryption, you're going to see that look. So yeah, I think focusing on really basic narratives, very, very simple things. For example, one, you could highlight how central banks work and how such an impossible task that is to do it properly. You could start with fractional reserve banking. Most people think that all their money is in their bank account. It's actually a very, very, very small percentage is. You could also start with the gold, like gold standard. most Americans still think that their dollar is backed by gold. So these are really easy, sort of very fundamental things that you can bring up to enlighten people and help them better understand their current system. I would say with anything Bitcoin related, keep it really, really simple. If you need to fight, if you need to fight proof of work FUD, for example, you could say, well, all the Christmas lights in the world use a lot of energy too, but people use energy to do certain things that they need to do. Bitcoin uses energy to protect the network, and we certainly wouldn't fault anyone to build vaults or walls or anything protective around assets that they care about. Bitcoin does the same thing in the digital world. And so, there's I'd say different basic primitives to use when you go talk about Bitcoin, and think of it as sort of cards to play. When people ask question X, you've got answer Y, and you've got these really, really kind of tight, concise answers that are very, very simple. I wouldn't go into how the blockchain works. People don't understand how their car works or how their microwave works or how their cell phone works. They just know what buttons to press. And so focusing on the higher level functions of what it does for them means a lot more than like, oh, you're going to talk to me about hashing or encryption.
Yeah, certainly that tendency to get a little verbose and go on in the longer form answers might be a way to lose people and get that glassy-eyed effect. The tight, taut answers to questions might be the way to get people a little more on board. But enough talking about the holidays and family. It's something I think many of us tight in the chest over. Let's talk about something that might actually be a little bit of positive news for the space itself. We've got those ongoing talks of a merger between Schwab and TD Ameritrade. It's looking more and more likely to go ahead by the day, with offers actually out there on the table. And it has a potential boon and upside for cryptos as a whole. So Dan, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, so this is a pretty exciting development in the traditional brokerage space. I think, for TD Ameritrade, that's the one that we're most interested in. TD Ameritrade has a good relationship with ErisX. I believe TD Ameritrade invested in ErisX, and their crypto offering will eventually be powered by ErisX. So, ErisX, I think, is a really exciting company in this space. They're basically focusing on U.S. Derivatives or U.S. futures. That's a really big deal for institutional traders. And I think with TD Ameritrade, they're a traditional retail brokerage. And so the idea that maybe the retail brokerage might open up access to Bitcoin has always been the kind of exciting allure of this relationship. TBD though on if Schwab shares the same sentiment. And certainly in a crypto bear market, they're definitely not going to. Now, of course, I think our best case scenario here is that they keep the project on life support, and then when crypto moons again or Bitcoin moons again, they come back and turn everything back on. So, I would say cautiously optimistic and slightly bearish about this, because they could very well kill it if a certain stakeholder at Schwab deems it unsavory or deems it immaterial. The best case scenario I see is that it's put on life support until something greater happens.
It seems a little bit of potential there, potentially infecting, I suppose, the Bitcoin mentality that exists within TD Ameritrade, infecting out into the wider brokerage and trade community. Looking generally at various different brokerage options around the United States, do you see hope that Bitcoin is going to receive wider offerings across, let's say, 2020 and looking into the future?
I think so. I mean, we already see Bitcoin and Robinhood, Cash App, SoFi. Those are three pretty big brokerages. Now you've got the big traditional ones like E-Trade, Fidelity. Fidelity has been very vocal about providing Bitcoin to their customers. I think they're just waiting for another bull run to turn on that functionality for retail. And so, I'm bullish on long-term brokerage, long-term with brokerages adding Bitcoin as an asset. For them, I think they see it as a boon for trading volume. There's a lot of trading volume with a lot of speculation going on with it. And so I think it'll be kind of a necessity for different brokerages to add in the next bull run.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing that play out and the next bull run for that matter come into our crypto trading into the future. In the meantime, Dan Held, I want to thank you so much for helping talk through some of the big issues that everyone's going to have to face, whether it be over a turkey or not. In the meantime, stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.